ask a question, if you can just rename yourself with at least your first name and an initial, I will be able to call on you, or else I'll be describing like the person in the purple shirt or something if I don't have a name. So it'd be helpful if we can just get a name. You don't have to have your video on, but certainly if you're called upon, it'd be great if you can ask your question. And for tonight, we're just going to use the reactions button that is on the bottom right of your screen. If you would click the thumbs up, I will be going as quickly as I can, constantly looking to see who's done that so I can write down your name. So I will try to call on you as obviously as the time permits with it. So hopefully those logistics will be good for everyone. Okay, and I will unmute you obviously to ask your question. We did have a few questions that were submitted to the PTSO, and we will ask those if they are not asked by someone else in this session tonight. So just welcome again. My name is May Chu. I am the co-president of Newton South PTSO. And I want to first of all thank Superintendent David Fleishman and School Committee Chair Ruth Goldman and Interim Principal Mark Aronson, who is joining us tonight. And hopefully we have a community discussion and an opportunity to ask questions that are specific to South and how we can all learn and understand what we could do to maybe improve our experiences at South this year. So I will kick it off to Principal Aronson with some opening remarks, and after everyone's opening remarks, we will start with the Q&A.
Thank you, May. Thank you for putting this on. And David and Ruth, thank you for joining us. This is really kind of cool for me because I'm actually seeing some of you that I've been communicating with for maybe up to 5 months now that I've never actually seen your faces. So it's kind of nice to see all of you. And I appreciate your communication. What I think the biggest thing I want to share with all of you right now is that when I think back to June, when I first started and to where we are now, I think we've really come a long way. And I feel pretty positive about the experience that we're providing at the school right now. And I want to really acknowledge the staff. The teachers, the counselors, the aides, the administrators, everyone is really doing a wonderful job. And the lens that I use is veteran teachers feel like they're first-year teachers all over again. None of us have ever done this before, and they're being asked to do a lot. And I really, I couldn't ask more from them with the efforts they put in. The other piece that I'm feeling positively about is the kids are reporting that they're making connections within their classes and with their teachers, which was a real focus of our work. And tonight, I know you really want to ask a lot of questions, and I want to do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. And to those of you who have interacted with me, I hope that you found me to be approachable and reasonable to speak with. And I just want to make sure you understand that I want to share things with you. I want to help you to understand things. I want to listen to you, but we're all intelligent people, and different points of view are reasonable. So I try not to put myself in a position where I'm trying to convince anyone that the way they think or what they believe is not the way they should think or believe. So if for any reason during the course of this conversation that should occur, it's not my intent. And more importantly, if after this evening you want to speak to me one-on-one, I'd love to do that. Your input has been really helpful to me. So thank you all for taking time to be here tonight. David? Oh, I'm sorry, May. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I'm new at this.
That's okay. Thank you. So I guess David or Ruth, who would like to go? Do you have some opening remarks? I'll go with David. We'll let you
Yeah,
go.
go ahead, David.
Sure. Thanks, May, and thanks for all your work. I know you've been doing a lot in this role. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see 92 people at this event. You know, one of the silver linings, and there aren't that many in the pandemic, is the increase in parent and family engagement. Typically, we might have one of these meetings and it would be, I don't know, Ruth, usually 10 people. And certainly, you know, having more families engaged, regardless of the subject, is a good thing. I also want to say that it's really tough being a parent of teenagers right now. There's been a lot of talk that it's tough being a teen. I speak from experience. It's tough being a parent of either younger teens or, in my case, later teens. It's really, really hard supporting kids, you know, giving them a sense of when this is going to end and dealing with hopelessness. And that's really, really tough right now. And as I think Mark was saying earlier, that's why there's been a special emphasis in our schools and our high schools on social and emotional connections. And you probably heard more of that at the back to school night and probably not as much talk about academic goals. And that's not because academic learning is not taking place. There's just a special emphasis right now on connection. Academic learning is taking place. As a matter of fact, when I look at kind of high school schedules, we have the longest high school day of, you know, compared to many districts. And that does give us some flexibility both to do academic work, but also time for students, as Mark was saying, to connect with each other and hopefully connect with, you know, with their peer, with their teacher. You know, that being said, we're surveying students right now. Those surveys are due very shortly, and we're going to take a real close look and make adjustments, get feedback. We got lots of feedback. As a matter of fact, I remembered at this very meeting in the spring getting feedback. We got a lot of feedback from students, and that will continue. That's something we've really learned. Kids' voices really matter a lot as we make adjustments. And of course, you know, the last step in this is in-person learning. There is no substitute for in-person learning. I think I've been clear from that in my communication from the start. You know, we know that from our early elementary opening, and we have a really strong team looking at how to overcome the obstacles in some cases that are unique to the Newton Public Schools, staffing, spacing, and achieving a really strong distance model, which I think we will do. And I'm really confident in our team, and I'm really confident in the way we've been able to implement. So we're hopeful about that. And there'll be a distance model regardless. So a lot of the really strong work that teachers have done and what they've learned, that continues in a future hybrid model, because distance is really the cornerstone of a lot of the work in the pandemic. And so that's why I'm really pleased, as Mark said, that teachers have worked so hard, learned so much, and made adjustments. And that will continue as we work and take this to the next level.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't have much to say, May. I'm really here to answer questions, but I will tell folks that we have a school committee meeting on Monday. We do have a full agenda, and we have we'll be doing the high school working group will be doing an update at that point. But we also have an elementary school update, and we also have an update on our ventilation work. The Crowley engineering firm is coming in, and I think that the high school update will be third on the agenda. So it may be on the later side, more around 9 o'clock, just an FYI on that. So we sent out the materials today. There really isn't much in the paperwork because there's so much going on with the working group that it'll be a real-time update. But you should put that on your calendar for Monday night, but I wouldn't bother tuning into the meeting unless you're interested in the other topics until around 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So I'm going to, like I said, I would like you to rename yourself just so if you plan to ask a question, And that way, and then use the reaction button to just click a thumbs up. That does go away, so you just need to flash that a couple times as I go through all the screens as I'm looking for people that are gonna ask a question. So if anyone wants to start on that, yep, I just saw someone. So I'm gonna ask Sarah, I'm gonna unmute you. Oh, hold on, where did you go? People here. Someone had a thumbs up and then they disappeared.
I don't think it sticks around that long. That's the only problem.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking for the name. The name is gone. So, okay.
Actually, May, there is a raise hand feature because I see someone, Alona Goldfarb, has her hand raised.
Got it. Okay, we're gonna ask for, I'm gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Thank you guys all for having this Q&A for us. I know there are probably lots and lots of questions. I have a particular question about the band program. During the back to school night, we heard from Miss Lindy that DESE has made an update to their guidance around playing indoors with special requirements for distancing and masking of the instruments and of the students. And I know that other districts are looking into allowing that. And I'm wondering whether Newton South or Newton Public Schools in general are going to look at that as well.
Yeah, we will. I actually was not aware of that. Lisa lets me know if any changes that will allow her to have more access and interact more with her musicians. So I will check in with her on that tomorrow. And in general, we've told our staff, if you would like to bring students in the building, let's talk about how we can do that in a safe, reasonable manner. So that's a given. I'm glad you brought it up. I didn't know, but I will be checking on that tomorrow. I'll probably send her an email tonight when this meeting's over.
Yeah, we're really committed to extracurricular activities right now. Alana, are so important, whether it's sports or band. Kids crave, those kind of activities right now. We all do. I mean, that's been a loss in terms of music in particular. Can be done in a distance format, but we want to get the kids together. It's been going on outdoors some, but now we have to shift. It's a great question.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, I know that Sarah, you are unmuted, so go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, sorry, excuse me. I'm not used to talking. It's hard to talk. So first, I actually wanted to thank everybody for providing the opportunity that we can actually, for once, have two-way communication. I think that that's been something that, for me, has been very frustrating, that there's just been a lot of one-way communication or one-on-one communication. I think it's really important that we continue to have more opportunities where the community can actually have conversations together. And ideally, what I really love is not just with the parents to be able to have conversations together, but also I don't know if there's any teachers involved, love to be able to start having like input where we can all be sort of working together, because what I have seen is there's just too much of people sort of doing the frustration of not being able to come together. People are going off in different directions, and I don't know that it's as productive as we need to be. I think related to that, I guess I'm going to have one statement and then I'm going to have my question. Mr. Aronson, I had asked back in August whether or not there was consideration to putting together some sort of Newton South specific working group that was representative of different stakeholders. And I guess I would just love to have that kind of thing reconsidered, because I do think that we're going to be in this for the long haul. There's a lot of things out there. And I think I think it's great that we have the high school working group that's going to be working and tackling on in-person overall for the district. But I would love to be able, I just would encourage some consideration to maybe putting some sort of structure in place at the school level where we can continue the dialogue and move forward in a productive, collaborative way. Okay, so my question.
Ask your question, please.
Okay. So for the high school working group, I know we're focusing on in-person learning models, but getting to some of the comments that were made in terms of extracurriculars, would love to hear a little bit more about where we are. Aside from athletics, that's pretty straightforward, but where we are on the other in-person experiences that were sort of put out back, we talked about 9th grade orientation, teacher meet and greets, club, like counseling, whatever. If you could talk to some of the things that have either happened already and the things that more importantly are on the radar, pilot opportunities for getting us in person while we wait for the high school working group to come up with its overall plan.
Thank you.
All right. So for some reason, I've lost my screen. Can you all see me?
Yes.
Okay, good enough. I'm not able to see you. So it's hard to know whether who's going to answer the question. I'll answer in terms of Newton South. And for the evening, I think I'll let David or Ruth answer regarding your district kind of questions. In terms of Newton South, we're at a place now where we're encouraging staff to bring students into the building. We are encouraging clubs to come into the building. We have a number of activities that are already occurring in the building or around the building, and hopeful to continue that, especially as the weather changes. In terms of any major events planned, what we're hoping is our student government elections were today. And what we're hoping to do is bring our student government together so that they will begin to look at how they may help support the planning of activities. The freshman event that we had took a significant amount of planning, but more importantly, it required us to shuffle the school day a bit. And in this particular time, that's not easy to do. So it is a bit challenging to think about bringing in other grades right now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm going to ask Liz.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, May. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Liz Padula. I'm a parent of a 10th grader and a 12th grader. So I wanted to know regarding some of the clubs and activities, when will the mock trial, Lions Roar, and the a cappella groups be allowed to meet in person? Because so far, those activities are still all virtual. And so I haven't, other than athletics, my daughters have not been offered any in-person clubs. And so I don't know where the disconnect is.
Yeah, I don't know where the disconnect is either. I would encourage, first of all, let me say, nice to, I can't see you now, but it's nice to say hello again. I would encourage your daughter, and she can contact me directly if I can be of help. It's really about the advisors, the adult advisors coming and figuring out how they want to try to bring the students into the building or onto the campus. So those things are doable as long as we're able to do them safely. What I've been doing for the most part is when plans are presented to me, I vet them through Health and Human Services because I want to make sure that we're not risking anybody's safety. And the more we've done it, the better able I am to advise where there are places that there needs to be an adjustment in the plan.
Liz, I would say, in terms of some of the activities that you named, I've been impressed how I have been talking to our high school newspapers at both high schools more than ever. And what I've been impressed by, so I talk to like student newspapers every week, and what I'm impressed by is they've figured out how to do this remotely, and they're working the way a couple of my friends are who write for the Globe. And so some of the learning, they need the in-person contact like we all do, but they are figuring out how to do something remotely in a really impressive way. I've got to tell you that I've been really impressed by the articles as good as ever. But as Mark said, that the next step is having them have some occasional in-person meetings just for the connection that they need.
Ditto on, I speak frequently to the Lions Roar, who, along with the Newtonite, are my favorite reporters in the in the country, I would say.
All right, Lisa Danitz.
Hi, nice to see all of you. I wanted to raise some issues around social and emotional well-being, some a little bit more broad and some a little specific, but two particular issues. In a lot of the public discussion around the concerns with social and emotional well-being, it seems to me there's this, and I'm sorry if there's not actually this assumption, but the way it plays out is an assumption about kids suffering because they are not around peers. And I imagine that is true for a majority, like a big majority of kids and families. That is actually not the issue that we have. And I just want to invoke, Ruth, you and I had a very lengthy conversation in the spring about equity and the ways in which it comes up that are not expected. And so I kind of offer that as context and background for what I'm about to say. Newton South, pre-pandemic, had a pretty tough environment socially and academically. At least that has been the experience of our family. And the shutdown, rather than creating a problem around not seeing kids, is allowing our child to hide and not have to address things. Like I need not just opportunities for her to participate. I need a requirement for her to be in the building because she never wants to go back there. And the longer this goes on, the more that gets entrenched. And so I really, I feel a little awkward kind of divulging that in front of, like 93 people, or actually 110 now. So actually, Mark, I'm hoping nobody can actually see my face. Although I think Ruth and David have heard my voice enough that they know who I am. But I urge you and beg you to please take note, not just of the kids who want to get back in there, but the kids who desperately don't but need to. And so that's kind of my request. I also just want to put out there something I'm aware of that I don't know whether the school folks are aware of, and that is, according to the medical community, there is a tsunami of eating disorders among teens right now. And that is really affecting school. And so I don't know that I have a particular question for any of you. To the extent that any of you have been thinking about either of these issues, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the regular communication that I hear, it just doesn't match my family's experience. And it makes us feel more frustrated with the school situation.
Thank you, Lisa.
First, I want to say, I'm sorry that you're having to deal with this experience. There's nothing worse than seeing your child suffering, and I understand that with many folks when you're talking about what's going on. It's all about trying to figure out how to help your children. We as in the building, we're very concerned about the students that are sort of invisible to us and we can't connect with. One of the things, for example, today, we spent some time talking about the election. Regardless of what happens on Wednesday, it's going to be a very interesting time for all of our students, staff, and so on. And in times when everyone's in the building, we have a real good idea of who's struggling and who isn't. So I don't have a solution for you, but what I can tell you is that we feel this every day as well. And the teachers and counselors talk all the time about how hard it is to know how are these students doing? Because through Zoom, it's a very different experience. I'm on the district committee looking at in-person learning, and what the experience you're describing, it's a given that many of our students are struggling because they're not in the building, and we're trying to address it. I wish I could say to you, well, we can do this, this, and this to bring your daughter in. One thing that we are starting to look at, and in COVID, everything takes more time than you would like it to, is looking at populations of students who might benefit from being in the building, safely spaced while still working remotely. So one thing I would say to you is maybe you and I can talk a little bit more offline, either tomorrow or next week, because regardless of where we're at in terms of bringing your daughter into school, I do think it's important that we figure out ways to maybe help her to connect and reach out to her.
Yeah, I just want to say, Lisa, I feel for your situation as well, and I know Mark is great on follow-up. I thought you outlined the biggest challenge in all of this perfectly. You know, we could debate all day, you know, hybrid learning academically is not perfect. It's flawed. The biggest benefit of in-person learning is what you said, Lisa. It's eyes on kids to see how they're doing. That is it. It's the social emotional part, and you captured it perfectly.
Thank you. Glenda?
Hi there. Hi, Mark. Nice to see
Hi,
you.
how are you?
Thank you for always returning my emails. And I think you and David both know I'm pretty direct, so I don't think tonight will be an exception.
I wouldn't expect less.
Yeah. So I think well, first of all, I just want to say to Lisa, I don't know how old your child is, but I think maybe reaching out to parents that are part of this group, and I'd be willing to participate and have maybe a buddy time, socially distant, with my own daughter. You know, assuming that your daughter is open to that. I think a lot of parents, you know, this is a pretty supportive and caring community. And so I'm happy to give Mark, and he has my email address, to pass it along to you or to other people with young, you know, high schoolers at South. I think it's a nice way for us to all sort of connect. But more directly to the reason for my attendance, and not just to listen to my friends in the community, but I have some real concerns about delays, about how long this process continues to take. I try to rationalize to myself that it's only been since September, but of course we know it's been since March. And so if the task force isn't actually going to make official or formal recommendations until December, and we're still in the foreseeable future language, and there are no members of the union on the task force, what is to prevent the heartache that happened this summer when we thought we had a plan, and 10 days before school, that plan did not happen. We had to pivot, a lot of emotional strain and stress. And so delay meetings to have meetings, like, you guys worked so hard this summer to get something really tangible to the school committee, and the school committee worked so hard to move it through. I mean, it was an 83-page report. So my real concern is that we are going to be met with the same resistance when 85% of us want our kids to have some form of in-person learning, respectful of the 15% that don't, and make sure they have access to equitable and equal education. But December 2nd is flu season. January's around the corner, holidays. Let's look at it again in the spring. Like, what are we really going to do to ensure that we're not pushing this needle to the point where it's March and all's for naught, and we don't have the opportunity to reconnect and regroup for any form of in-person learning?
Thank you, Glenda.
Ruth, do you want to take it? Or you want to
Yeah,
start?
I mean, I can jump. I
You
always
go
defer.
first, I'll follow.
I always defer to you folks, but I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I appreciate it's the 50,000 or $50 million question, Glenda, and I appreciate you being direct. And I think it's, you know, what we're all struggling with. So I do feel like we had a, you know, our plan this summer did not account for some challenges that, as David has said, are very specific to Newton. And one of them was the number of teachers available to come in person, along with space issues, which are actually not dissimilar to a couple of other of our peer districts, Lexington being the main one. And I think this working group is tackling this in a much more comprehensive way that we honestly did not have. We didn't set it up to have that kind of capacity this summer because we were getting, you know, 22 schools open. And we had a really great opening of our elementary schools. And I will say flatly, we did put, I think in the end, the school committee said, absolutely, we've got to get the elementary kids in because like, as crushing as Zoom is for high school students, like you can only imagine kindergartners and first graders on Zoom. Like it just doesn't really even work at all. So, and we are getting our middle schools in next month on 16th. That is definitely happening. I think we have a much better sense of what the challenges are, and the group is very specifically addressing those. And on November 16th, I think we will have a very clear picture of what our options are and what will work, what will absolutely work in Newton. And then it's a question of the school committee and the NPS administration determining which of those options is the best one for Newton, or the one where, as David says, there's always trade-offs. There will be trade-offs around academic learning. There will be trade-offs around a variety of things. And we will pick the one that we think is the best. And I think immediately, once I would say the writing is on the wall a little bit on the 16th, we will begin to put in place things that we need to do to implement that whatever choice we make. So we're not going to wait until we vote to start, you know, figuring out space, whatever the different things are that need to be figured out to accommodate that model. So it's not completely linear. I mean, I think we're already doing a lot of things that need to get done. All the ventilation work, all the building, that's all going to be done by November 16th or a week or so after in the high schools. We went with our open window policy in the elementary schools until all that work got done there, which I think is basically complete because we prioritize them. So I think we are well on our way, and our goal absolutely is to get kids building in the time period in January that fits well. I know there's an MCAS thing. I know there's a lot of in early January or something. There's, you know, different things, the end of term, whatever it is. But that is absolutely, the school committee is unequivocal about that. And we don't want to presuppose the outcome of the working group. So we really need to let that process do its best work. Otherwise, we're going to end up with unforeseen challenges again, because we didn't do the work that some of the tweaking and work that we should have done.
Right.
So
I agree with everything Ruth said. I appreciate your direct question. And I would hope at December 2nd that we actually have it, you know, I hate to say it, but a date of some date of when this would happen, which is really your question. And it can't be nearly as late as that last date you suggested. It has to be all hands on deck in order to do this. That's what it takes. We have more schools open in Newton than any school district in the state. And our final task is all hands on deck, getting the high schools open in a way, as you said, Glenda, that works for all kids. That's really the goal.
As somebody who's on the working group, I think, and did the work this summer, one of the advantages that we have now is we've done a lot of work that we're able to bring forward. We've also spent a month and a half or so in school, so that's helped us to get a sense of some things. I feel like I feel like the group is working well, and I expect that we'll be on time with the timeline. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here, partially because I think it's something that needs to be answered, and my hope is that if I am quoted, I'll be quoted correctly. At my first parent meeting, the question about teachers came up, and my feeling regarding the teachers is that all of us are in a place where we all have to make decisions that we think are in the best interest of ourselves and our families. And there is no right or wrong decision, and that for me or anyone else to judge whether somebody should or shouldn't be coming into work, if their doctor has decided that they shouldn't come into work, we have to respect that, or I'll say I have to respect that. And in terms of the NTA participating on the committee, the NTA was invited, and I'm speaking for myself. I'm guessing that the reason the members don't participate is because they're participating in a plan that possibly they have to then vote on. So that's my only thought. But I don't think one of the questions that we won't know is, once we come back with our plan, we'll have to look at how our staffing goes. But I also don't want this to boil down to, well, the teachers won't come in, or whatever it might be, because we're all living in an unknown. Even though science is this way, science is that way, no one knows for sure. So on a personal and professional level, I respect that the district is trying to do the best they can. And I also respect the fact that our teachers, administrators, Newton Public School staff have to follow the best advice and their best medical advice and so on. And I'm hopeful that the more we do have teachers coming into the building and so forth, that they'll start to feel more comfortable and a little safer. It's going to be interesting to see. But I felt like that, for me, I felt like that was part of your question. So I wanted to try to answer it.
Thank you. So I have 4 people who have questions, and I'm just going to ask one that was submitted before I proceed to, it'll be Jessica Burns will be the next person that gets to ask a question. I can't seem to unmute you. Okay, so one question that was submitted, and this goes, I'm assuming, to David. And we love you, Principal Aronson, but you are an interim principal. So the question was, when will the principal search for the new South principal begin? And do we expect a new principal to start fall 2021?
That's such a good question. You know, May, it feels like so far away, doesn't it? The fall of 2021.
It's not.
And I do want to acknowledge it's great to have Mark here. You know, Mark has wonderful social and emotional skills, which is so important right now. And his passion and candor is incredibly valued. We are going to get the principal search going in November, in probably December, and begin after the start of the new year. We're already, you know, getting back in touch with a couple of candidates that we know are very about last spring. So we are going to do a thorough search. We benefit, you know, Mark, you've often talked about what a strong and cohesive administrator team there is at Newton South. That's a real strength of the school. It makes the job very desirable. I think our job is to do some really hard recruiting, because what we know is people in a pandemic are not looking to necessarily make change. But I think this is a great opportunity. Mark will leave the school in good shape, and the strong administrator team, I think, is what really makes the job incredibly attractive, along with the very dynamic faculty and passionate parent community, which we have right here.
Thank you. All right, Jessica.
Yeah.
Burns.
Thanks. I have a junior. First of all, I want to just echo what Lisa said about, in all the decision-making processes and working groups to not see kind of what student desire might be or parent needs as monolithic. We know that every family and every child is experiencing this differently. So I'm glad Lisa raised that. This is on this call, it's the first time I've heard that I knew some kids were back in the building for academic reasons and support reasons, but I didn't know that there was some other kind of goings on in or around the building. So I didn't know that. And I'm just wondering, we've all had to be so flexible in the pandemic. So on the one hand, I'm like all for any ad hoc decisions or flexibility, like, oh, this club can come or this class can come. On the one hand, that's okay. On the other hand, I'm like, well, when does my kid get to be that kid whose group or class or club or whatever it is, how is that happening? And it sounds a little bit like it's teacher initiative, which is cool, but like, what if those aren't her teachers?
Mm-hmm. A great question. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so it's a great question, I guess, but I'm not sure I actually understand it. So are you saying that if your child has a club and wants to come in the building, they have to wait for the teacher to initiate it? Is that what the question is?
Or a class, I think she's asking Mark, in terms of.
So if it's the class is teacher initiated, definitely. The clubs can be student or teacher initiated. And it's been a combination of both.
Just to clarify, the PTSO has been working with the administration in terms of looking at opportunities for students to get back on campus for what I would say more of a social connection. So the seniors had an opportunity to do that. We did survey students, which we got a reasonable amount for grade 9, 10, and 11, a lot from seniors in terms of what type of connection makes sense in person. Most of them said that. So we're working through that to see if there's an opportunity, working with the administration of how we can do something. For example, a scavenger hunt has been proposed, and we are looking with parent community to see, is there something we can do by houses to bring the kids back on campus and around Newton Center, for example, to do a scavenger hunt in their own selected cohorts that, obviously parent approved, whether they participate. So we're trying to do some of that. The clubs themselves, nobody's actually in person other than a club that initiates. For example, the yearbook has had some meetings at the school, and that's been driven by the teacher that leads the yearbook. So there are been various opportunities, but not specifically for all grades. And the PTSO, and as Marcus said earlier, we are looking at ways to try to do that, but obviously it's a challenging situation with who's actually in the building and the schedule that the kids are on right now in terms of when that is doable. So keep an eye out from at least the PTSO perspective to see how we can possibly get some opportunities for each grade. And we're right now focused on grade 10 and 11 since they haven't had an opportunity yet to be on campus. Okay, so next person was Julia Shapiro. I gotta find everybody again. Hold on, see if I can find Julia. Let me just look you up. Julia Shapiro, where are you? I don't see you in the system. Oh, wait. Sorry, there's a lot of screens right now I'm trying to find. Why is it? I'm trying to find Shapiro here.
I'm not just distracted. I'm trying to see if I can figure out how to get my picture back.
Okay, sorry. I don't see it. So Julie might have moved on. I don't see her in the participant list. So I'm going to move on to Alyssa. I'm going to unmute you. You are not on camera, so.
Great. Hi there. Thanks so much for doing this. It's been great to hear some give and take. As we're waiting to figure out the hybrid model and if it will work, I know we all want to make sure that our kids are still getting a good education. I've heard that a lot of teachers are feeling constrained by not being able to give homework, and students are afraid that they're not learning what they should be learning. I was wondering if there's any thought about changing the no homework policy.
Yeah, there always has been too. This has been a little disappointing to me in how the messaging has been put out. So I'm going to take I hope a brief period of time here to help give some context. So over the summer, the district, Henry Turner, myself, Toby, and the working groups felt that it was really important that we focus on community building and social emotional learning. Also, we felt that, and also at the same time, Newton South was examining its own homework policies and looking at the pressure students were under, the competition around grades, and also somewhat, and this is someone else's word, but I think it's appropriate, some of the academics was becoming a little bit transactional. In other words, how much work do I have to do to get this grade? Or if I stay up an extra hour, how much better will I do in those things? And kids were not leading healthy lifestyles. We also wanted to give teachers an opportunity to work with the 90-minute blocks, with the feeling that the 90-minute blocks would enable them to incorporate a combination of techniques, so the kids wouldn't be on Zoom the whole time. And that's been challenging, and I understand why. It's a new form of teaching, and like I said, everybody's kind of in a first year mode, and our ability to do professional development has not been what I would have liked it to have been. And also, I think when we're in the kind of place we're in, we go to what makes us feel most comfortable. So a certain step, changing a way of teaching right now is really, really hard. So that's what was behind the homework piece. And it wasn't, I appreciate that some teachers saw it as a ban, but there was an intent behind it. So where we are now is, in fact, today I met with the admin team, and we're about to put out what I'll call our phasing in and outside of class work. One of the challenges that has come up, and it's not unusual in these times, is our faculty meeting is this coming Wednesday. And when we were making our plan to speak about this and put information out, we weren't really thinking that this was also going to be the day after the election, and what that might mean in terms of trying to have these kind of conversations. So what my hope is that sometime next week, the teacher will see a copy of what we're proposing. And this work comes from them working within their departments, some of the work that was done over the summertime, and some of what we've learned since school has started. And one of the things that that I think is important here is Newton South was in the process of making a cultural shift anyway, and COVID has just become the impetus for that change, because we have to make changes anyway. So that was a little long-winded, but you should see something, if not next week, certainly the week after, that will be very clear, because one of the things I'm trying to do is whatever we send to staff and students, I want to send to families and vice versa. So I hope that explanation is helpful.
Thank you. All right. I apologize for not pronouncing the same right. Naritan Mustafa. You had a question, and then the next one was Heidi Gambino, so.
Yeah, thank you very much for the forum. It's a pleasure to listen to your responses and questions. I have a comment and I have two questions, and my questions are specific. It's the same question, but it applies equally to the positions that Mr. Fleishman, Goldman, Ms. Goldman, and Mark Aronson are holding. It's the same question. My comment is this is 9 months, right? And last time I checked, 4 kids of mine were all from conception, idea to birth, were 9 months. And I had time to buy the crib, and I had time to create the family and prepare them and all of that. We have had 9 months, right? So my question is very specific. From the bodies and the position that you represent, can you describe your decision-making criteria and the timing that it takes to get there?
Decision-making criteria for what?
To go back to school.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's shifted. In the spring, we were living sort of several weeks to several weeks. I think we all remember when we closed the schools, we basically were told to close school. And then we had hoped that we'd open a few weeks later. But I think by late March, early April, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And there was somehow this idea that we would reopen in May. I think David and I had many conversations that figuring that it was very unlikely that we would open again for the school year, just because we were looking at the COVID numbers and how they would likely play out over the spring. But we were basically under, essentially an order from the state to keep the schools shut and to switch over to remote learning, which we did. There were lots of challenges with it. And I think, we surveyed students at the high schools. We had kids who thought there was too much work, not enough work. Overall, I think our students felt like things were going as well as they could expect. And then we started planning for the fall. And our criteria were to get our students back in the building safely, and that includes all sorts of different things, from buildings to education to professional development, all those criteria. And so that is what we have been working on and continue to work on.
Yeah, I will just add, I really appreciate kind of the angst and frustration associated with your question, because I think we all have it.
I don't think
we all have, the anxiety, because none of us, no school district has ever done this before. No school, no teacher. As Mark said, we're all first year. We are learning a ton. I was talking to several principals today, not high school, about how, we're making changes as we learn more, but not too many changes, because it can be chaotic and disruptive. So we're trying to tweak, and Mark's talking about making adjustments based on student feedback, based on what we learn. I actually think that when our high schools open, they will be different based on what we've learned over the last couple of months than they would have been in September or October, because people are changing constantly and readjusting. We just have to make sure that whatever plan we have, we get it right, because it's hard to change once we go in a certain direction. So, it's a ton of planning, readjusting, experimenting, reflecting, getting lots of feedback to see what works, because that's why hearing from high school kids is really important. I mean, I was struck last spring in some surveys where, you'll remember this, Ruth, that the students had very different perceptions of school than many of their parents did. And that was really interesting to us. So what it really tells us that we need to do forums with students, we need to do forums with families, and Mark does a really good job of getting feedback from faculty. And we need to take all of that feedback, and thankfully, all of those stakeholder groups are actually represented on the working group, which I think is a strength of the process right now, which hasn't always been the case in our district or other districts. I don't know, Mark, if I missed anything that you want to touch on.
No, I just want to make sure I answer the question. As a principal, I don't make the decisions around whether we do or don't use a hybrid model or remote model. I'm part of the process, and I feel comfortable with the decisions that we have made. And I know that having been part of the process, whether we've done things well or not, the intent has been to do the best we can. And the amount of work that people have put in is just amazing. And I know that in my 40 years, I've never worked nearly as hard as I'm working now. And I'm not, this isn't a complaint, or I'm not looking for any pity or sympathy, but it's the kind of a job where really when you're awake, you're thinking about how can we help our kids? How can we help our teachers? In all the years that I've worked in education as an administrator, it was always important to me, but it wasn't really on my mind 24/7, which it is now. And I think it's fair to say that that's the case for the administrative leaders in the district. And when you talk to the teachers are struggling to recognize that they're doing really good work because it doesn't feel that way to them. And it's really, really hard for them to be working as hard as they are and putting in the hours they are and not feeling like they're doing a good job. And as much as you all have supported them in many ways, and myself, it's still thinking about our students. I just feel that that's part of the answer about the whole process and so forth. We're all working toward the same goal, but we have different roles in the process.
Thank you, Mark. So we have about 10 more minutes, and we've got a few people that I want to try to get in. So I know it's a tough balance between trying to comment and then ask your question, but we just need to try to get that, minimize the comment if you can, and get the questions out so we can get your responses. So Heidi, and then there's Andrea will be next.
Did you unmute me? May, you have to unmute me.
You are.
You are.
You were. Now you have to unmute you again. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I that wasn't my, I will first say that if we think that we are in the best possible position right now, after 9 months of careful planning and listening to feedback, I would definitely disagree. And I would find that very disappointing if people are satisfied where we are right now. But that's not the comment that I wanted to make. I think what's disturbing also is, I think I just heard that when someone asked a question about homework, I heard that there's been thought to change it. You plan to change it. You plan to have a meeting to change it with the teachers. However, because the meeting happens to fall on the day after the election, you're really going to have to move it, and that's not going to work. And I say that because that's just one more what I feel is an example of just get it done. I have to work the day after the election. My husband, who's a teacher, has to work the day after the election. He has a staff meeting the day after the election in his school district. If I misunderstood what you said, that's fine. But to just have that comment like, oh, it's falling the day after election, like what's the point of that? If you have something that you're going to change, I really don't want to, and you plan to discuss it on the Wednesday, the day after the election, why are you not going to do it?
To answer your question, is this Ms. Gambino?
It is.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. And if it isn't
let me answer your question.
But I'm just gonna say, if there isn't if the day after the election doesn't really matter about getting this done, whatever you do, then why bother to mention it? Because it's just these things that are thrown at us as, like, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
Let's try to get this. So the question is, why are we not implementing something after on election?
Yeah. So first, to be clear, that decision hasn't been made. What I was saying was, and that doesn't mean it won't be made. What I'm really responding to is, and it ties into what we're trying to do at school. If our teachers and students are not in a place to receive the information, this is important information. We've spent a lot of time on it, and we've thought a lot about this process, and I want to make sure that everyone is getting and able to focus on what our plan is, because I want the plan to work well. And without getting into the specifics of my reasons behind it, I recognize that you're not in agreement with my decision to think about the social emotional needs, and that you see us as sort of like, why don't you just do it, and so on. And I respect that, but that's the reason.
Thank you. Andrea?
Hi, thank you. Just another question about extracurricular activities. I know back in the club fair, there were a lot of clubs that had posted, and students could also send emails, and they're supposed to follow the Instagrams or Facebooks about meetings. And I know my son had looked into about like 4 different clubs, and there's been no follow-up from any of those since then. I don't know if maybe he's missing the boat there. 2 of them were the creative arts magazines, Reflections, and another one I can't remember. But is it possible that there's information being posted in other places that we may not be aware of to look for?
I don't think so. I will, when I get back to school tomorrow, I will look into that. But I think what's probably happening is those clubs are just not currently active. But again, if you wouldn't mind, just send me an email. Tomorrow, send it tonight. I'll look at it tomorrow, and I will follow up with you if there are some other areas you should be looking at, or information. And if I can find out information about the clubs, I will.
There is a document that is on the Newton South High School website under the student club activities that Vice Principal Hardiman had pulled together. So there's also information there on the contact, and maybe you can also double check there whether that particular club is communicating in a different way too. Judy Kaufman. And I think this could be the last question. I'm asking Judy, I'm trying to unmute you. Judy, are you there? Maybe not. Oh. No, not asking. For some
There's
reason
someone else, May?
Yeah, I'm looking to see if there's anyone else. It looks like I don't have any other hands. I'm looking at, there was a couple of questions. This was so there's one question that was submitted, and I'm just going to read it as is. It says, in what ways is Newton Public School an exemplar for other schools this year? Tough question. So David.
Yeah, wow. That is a really good question, May. I think some of the collaborative work that I was just talking about with a couple of principals today, I think is really going well in terms of teachers piloting, experimenting, improving, taking risks. The other thing I think, that Mark, you were alluding to is people aren't content. None of us are content. And I think that is a common theme, whether we're parents or teachers or administrators or school committee members. It's really hard to be content right now. And that's not a good thing. But this idea that we're all first year, Mark, I think I've seen people taking risks and collaborating. And I think we hopefully will be a district that will learn a lot from this year and continue practices that are working and end things we've done for years that don't make sense. I think schools will maybe be very different in good ways. Obviously, you know, there's a loss of, obviously at high school right now, of not having students in the building, but we've also focused more on social and emotional in other ways. There's more talk about student well-being and trying to get the balance. That's a good thing. We'll figure out this homework, you know, Mark, but maybe it won't be the same as it has been in the past if we get it right and pilot and experiment. So it's a great question. I'd love to answer it again at the end of the year, May, as well, because it feels like we're 6 weeks in, and that's why I'm going to give an incomplete answer. But I'd love to answer it later on in the year.
But I would just chime in, David. I mean, from my school committee district-wide, wide lens perspective, I think what's going on in our elementary schools is actually outstanding. And what's going on in our preschool program is amazing. Having visited them, I do think we did, you know, we worked 24/7 in August, and you and many others did not take a day off, literally, and we got all 16 of those schools open. And I think we're having another push right now to do the same with our middle schools. And it's hard to sustain that level of 24/7, 7 days a week, all the time. And we will do the same and get our high schools open in the new year. So I do think if you step way back, and that's what I do, I think there are some terrific things going on. I think we are doing a good job at the high schools, and we are sorely missing that in-person experience. And it's very difficult to make up for that with more clubs and more Zooms and more, you know, it's like more Zoom doesn't help anyone, frankly, right now. So I think, you know, and that is our next challenge. But I do think we're also doing some really great work. We have a new director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's some great work going on there that I think probably parents are less aware of. So I think, and those are the things that other districts are coming to Newton for. They're really interested in our elementary model. It's probably working better than most elementary models. And I think they're coming to us for sort of the equity and inclusion work that's been going on as well. And I think, you know, as high school parents right now, it's not obvious what is awesome about Newton. I'll be frank about that. But I think, you know, district-wide, that's how I see it right now.
I want to follow up on the exemplar. I think that potentially we're going to be a district in some ways similar to we were when I was a student growing up in Newton, where people came from all over the country to see how we were doing things to connect kids to school and make learning relevant. I think that potential is happening right now, and it's going to be end of the year is certainly part, but it's going to be more than just the end of the year. And I think that for the first time in my career, while we've always tried to do and be an actively anti-racist system, I really feel like we're going to become a much more actively anti-racist system. And I think that we're also going to be creating cultures in our both high schools where marginalized students are no longer feeling marginalized, and people who feel like they don't matter are going to know that they do matter. And I think that in general, when students and teachers feel better about where they're working and know that people care about them, they're going to learn better. And I think that we're also redefining what it means to be well educated in some ways. And I would like to think that we're preparing our kids for a future world that is changing, and we're trying to change with it to prepare them, as opposed to holding on to practices that either did not work or got us to where we are today. So I'm really hopeful, and I'm really glad that I'm able to be part of the work, as challenging as it is. I think I've learned more in the last 5 months than I have in the last 5 years. So I think we're on the right track. So
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
So
Mark. That was great.
Good close, Mark.
Yeah.
we are technically at the end of the meeting, but if Mark, Ruth, and David, if you guys can give us 5 more minutes, I just had 2 more parents that have had their hands up, so I'm gonna just try to get through that. If we can, again, just balance the commentary to the question, and then we could at least get Michael, Levine, and then Evelina. I believe your hand was also up. All right, so Michael Levin.
Yeah, hi. I'm actually Ethan Levin. I'm a student at Newton South, and I'm a senior. I was popping in and just was sitting next to my parents while this meeting was going on. And
hi, Ethan. Nice to meet you.
hi, nice to meet you too. And I've heard the words social and emotional at least 25 times. And I was just wondering, in my senior year, how with college applications going on right now, the SAT getting canceled and rescheduled every weekend, and then a schedule change in school, a email that says that my grades aren't going to count from the end of my junior year, which is supposed to be the most important year, and that my grades from the beginning of my senior year also probably are going to be changed because there's no pluses and minuses, and that we're not calculating a GPA. And I was just wondering, whose idea was it to make all these different changes, and how is that helpful to the social and emotional needs of students at South and seniors especially?
Sure. Clearly it's created stress for you, and I'm sorry that's the case. And my best answer to that is that I think that when we get to the end of the process, it's going to be my expectation and our hope that you will find that this process has not hurt you in looking at colleges and hoping to get to the college of your choice. We were thoughtful in terms of doing some research and contacting colleges about some of the changes we were planning and how we thought it would or would not impact our students. And if we thought that it was going to negatively impact your chances for college and so forth, I can't say for sure that we wouldn't have still done the things that we're doing, because change happens at certain times, and sometimes it does have a negative impact on certain groups when it happens. But I hope that won't be the case. The reason around the grades was to actually decrease some of the pressure and competition around grades, and also to recognize that when we evaluate students in a model that we've never been in, what metrics do we use to evaluate students? We also wanted to take into account that many students were going to be learning in a very different environment than they previously had. So in a sense, the rules had changed for them. We also wanted to take some of the pressure off of teachers as well, in terms of looking at trying to, what's an 89, what's a 91, those types of things. And we are trying also to move toward a little more of a model of learning is for the value of learning, and not so much focus on what my grades are and so forth. And I realize that's a big change for students. And in terms of the GPA, that was a district-based decision in both high schools. So I'm not, I can't necessarily speak to that as directly. And I think that any changes we make, especially when we have maybe not the best ability to communicate them in the situation we're in, are really challenging. But my hope is that if we have this conversation in the spring, while I'm sorry for the stress that it's causing you, that ultimately your goals will have been met.
Right, and Ethan, I just want to add that colleges, as Mark said, are making the same kinds of changes in terms of colleges not requiring SATs, professors not focusing on grades. I mean, I speak as somebody who has 2 kids in college, just not focusing on grades the way they used to for kids who want to get into grad school, that they're focused on learning and thinking about the social and emotional well-being of kids during a pandemic. So I just want to say that you will be well prepared for college. In a very different way than previous generations. But as Mark was saying, we also have opportunities that we've never had before in other ways to grow and develop and be resilient. So I do think you will be ready, but it is really different. I understand how that creates some anxiety for you.
Thank you. So is it Evelina? You've had your hand up, so I think this could be the last question.
Yeah, I just want to say that to be honest, just a comment that I'm in general just disappointed. I know we talked about this before, but just looking around all other towns near us, they all were able to open on time. So all this planning and continuous planning and more planning, I don't know what we're planning and why we can just open like other towns did. I met teachers during open house. They all seem eager to go back to the school. Kids are eager to go back to school. I am worried, like some other parents said, when we are ready to open school, it's going to be January, flu season, high rate. We're just not going to open, and we miss this beautiful fall weather, this awesome opportunity to be in school. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, so I know there's a couple of other, there's been a few more hands as we've gone over our schedule, but I think I will thank everyone who's asked the questions, and for those that did have a couple that are left, if you would send them to the PTSO, we can attempt to get those answered for you. I hope you found the session of value. And if not, I would appreciate feedback back to the PTSO, and we could look at how we can do future community discussions and Q&As. There is still a lot of challenges for all of us who have students at South, and we know everyone's working really hard, but yes, there are still questions that are unknown. We understand there's remote and in-person opportunities that would benefit students, and from a PTSO perspective, we will keep working with administration and find ways of whether it can be done, obviously in a safe environment. So thanks you to everyone for participating. Thank you, Mark, Ruth, and David.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks,
Have a nice
everybody.
evening.
Thanks, May.
Appreciate
Happy to
it.
come back. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The
Bye-bye,
session
everybody.
is recorded, and we will post that. Thank you.
Great, thanks.